Welcome everyone to tonight's Facebook Live event. We are celebrating the end of month 9 of the Lady Darby Read-Along and book 7, An Artless Demise, the London book, the London Burgers. I'm so glad y'all can join me tonight. Please feel free to post your comments and questions below in the comment section, and I will be checking those throughout the night. Please post what you would like me to talk about, what questions you want me to answer, all that. And I will be checking throughout to make sure I'm talking about what you want to hear. I'm just making sure that we are live and it looks like we're good. Yes. All right. Wonderful. So yes, post below, and I have some questions and topics gathered from the Facebook group, the Lady Darby Read-Along Facebook group, which I will post the link to at the end of this. If you don't happen to be a member of that yet, we have 2 more months of the read-along to go until taking us up to the release of book 10, A Perilous Perspective. I should mention this, the release date for A Perilous Perspective, it's been moved around a little bit. And it's now actually a week earlier than the last scheduled release date. So it's now April 19th, and that should be the final release date. So hopefully. So April 19th will be the date that releases on print and electronic and audiobook. So everything, all formats. So I hope you will check it out. But anyway, about book 7. So An Artless Demise is the London book. When I first started writing the series, it's really the book that I had in mind. I knew that I wanted to get Lady Darby to November 1831 into London for the London Burkers, especially given her background, the body snatching, and the fact that the Burke and Hare murders kind of set off the whole panic about her involvement. Well, I mean, it was scandalous anyway, but then her involvement with her husband and did he procure bodies from body snatchers and all these things that kind of play into her, this persona that's been built up about her in the press and the popular imagination, this panic. What has this gentlewoman been involved with? What does she know? All these things that have these myths about her, I guess is what I would say. So the fact that she's back in London and then these London Burkers happen, of course, creates a crisis, and it really drives the whole plot. And it's also a fascinating moment in history. There's been a lot written about Burke and Hare, but there's not been a lot written about the London Burkers. And I've spoke about this before. Sarah Wise wrote a brilliant book called The Italian Boy. If you're interested in learning more, it's not just about the Burkers, it's about the history of the city at that time. There's just so much great history included in that. And it was instrumental to my research for this book. So highly recommend that if you're interested in more about that. But it really kicks off and finally brings about the changing of the law and the passing of the Anatomy Act, which will be coming up in 1832. It hadn't happened yet in the series as the end of book 9. So we'll see how that comes about. So don't want to delve too much into that right now. So anyway, if you've got comments or questions, please go ahead and post those. And otherwise, I'm going to kind of delve into the questions that I gathered beforehand. So tell us a bit more about this strange trafficking of Italian boys. Only Italian? Were any of the offers of a better life legitimate, or was it all a racket? How long did this go on? So yes, I learned all about this from the Italian Boy book, because that was what the main suspect that the London Burkers were arrested for was this Italian boy, because they couldn't find out his name. And actually, we don't know to this day whether they got Carlo Ferrari as really who the boy was. There's a lot of speculation and evidence that it might not have been, that it was kind of some people coming forward. They claim that that's who it was, but they don't really know. So but they do know that it was an Italian boy. And there were these Italian boys that lived in London. They were very popular figures, street figures, and especially in people's imaginations, because we're very sympathetic. There were these good-looking boys that were often either showing animals or playing instruments or things like that on the street, basically kind of beggars to get money. And they worked for these padroni that had gone to Italy and recruited them, and their families had sold them to them thinking that it was going to be like an apprenticeship, like they were going to learn a craft or a trade or become a part of a theater troupe, something legitimate to establish their lives. And all of this really got kicked into play because when Napoleon came into Italy, it destroyed the Italian states as they were. It really broke it up and shuffled it up, and the Italian economy was in ruins at the end of those Napoleonic wars. So there's a lot of families that were not in good financial situations, and they thought they were helping their sons, and then come to find out that in a lot of situations they were not, that they were being preyed upon. So the research, I have not done an extensive amount of research. The research I did into this was specifically just because of the London Burkers case. So I cannot state definitively. It was definitely a rampant problem. The police as they were, because they were just established in 1829, were in some ways in cahoots with this because they knew they were operating, that they had these houses full of these Italian boys that they just kind of let it go on. And, but it was a different era. It wasn't what we think of as welfare and all these things that we go in and try to fix problems. There were a lot of street children who knew where they were. I mean, if they didn't have a guardian and they were, rounded up, they were taken to the poorhouse, so there wasn't, the orphanages as we think of them were just really getting started. And a lot of those, they only took in these foundling homes. They would take in the first child of the first child born to a woman, like out of wedlock, but they wouldn't take subsequent children. So, I mean, there was a lot of intricacies to these things. So there were a lot of street children. And so they kind of got overlooked. There was just a lot of bad situations that a lot of people weren't really conscious of how bad it was. But these Italian boys were very, highly public. They saw them. I mean, they were these sympathetic figures that people would see, that they would notice. It's not that they gained interest, I guess, is what I would say. I don't know. So I can't really speak definitively whether, I'm sure that they were taken maybe from other countries that were in similar situations. The Italian ones were a specific place that there was a lot of them. There was a big Italian community in London because the Italians were well known for their optical skills and like their sculpture skills. There were certain skills they were highly skilled craftsmen, and there was a big community in London that they utilized those skills. So they were already there, and then they just kind of adding to that. And then, so what I'm saying is I don't know all of it. What did go on. There was probably other countries. I didn't do extensive research because the book wasn't solely on that. So if it's something you're interested in, I'm sure you can find more information about that. And I don't really know how long it went on, but I do know that it was kicked off because of the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And, welfare society and rounding up people and making sure that people are taken care of and children are taken care of it's really a 20th century thing. I mean, they didn't worry about it so much in the 19th century, sadly. So it probably went on for a long time. So moving on, next question. This is not strictly about this particular book, but as you're writing, do you ever picture your characters' plot lines playing out in TV series, movies? If so, do you picture certain actors for various roles? So yes, when I'm writing, a lot of my scenes, I imagine as if they're playing out on a screen. That's just how I stage them in my mind, like the characters walking in and what do you see and how it plays out. It helps me. I guess the staging is what I would call it. So yeah, definitely. And there's certain scenes that I can play out of my mind, and I can just imagine on a TV screen or a movie screen, which would be amazing. Maybe someday. To me, it would want to be the right people to take on the project. I mean, that's a big part of it. You don't just want anybody, to buy your rights and take this on. You want somebody you really trust and that you feel believes in your vision. or maybe not. I mean, some authors, they don't care, just, you know, they sell it because it's not, once it's put on screen, it's yours, but it's not yours. It's because also becomes their, you know, work of art. So, but for me, I want the right person to take it on. But yeah, I definitely do picture them as like things playing out. And as far as actors, though, I don't really usually picture specific actors. I've said before that Sydney in my mind is a cross between Simon Baker and Rupert Penry Jones. That's just how I picture him. Lord Gage, Simon Baker would be amazing Lord Gage at this stage. But I mean, other than that, I don't really have anybody in mind for Kira or Alana or Trevor or any of those, which I kind of like. They're just, to me, they're who they are. They're just their own people, real people. And so if they ever did make a film version, then I wouldn't be necessarily set in my ways about what the person needed to look like. So, so I kind of like that. I kind of like that aspect, and I like to hear what other readers think, you know, when they picture, the characters when they're reading, you know. And it's funny to me because sometimes I get very polar opposite from different readers who they think of, who they imagine. So it's interesting to hear. Okay. Also, just an aside, I'm missing Earl Grey with Kira, although I do understand the logistics of carrying a pet around as an investigator. Yeah. I do like to see the occasional interactions. Yes. So I love Earl Grey. He is so much fun. Whenever possible, I try to bring him in. And I love pets and I love cats and I love dogs, but yeah, the fact that they move around, it would be really hard to have a pet. This is what I realized. That's why I thought having him go to her nieces and nephews kind of solves that problem. And she still can see him once in a while. If they ever did settle down, they would definitely get some pets, some dogs, cats, whatever, something. But they're not to that stage yet. So we'll see. We'll have to see. That'll be something that might play out later, because I love with the series getting to move them around a lot. It lets me explore a lot of different areas in Britain rather than just one area. So, and I love setting. It's a big part to me. It's a character in and of itself. So two of my favorite parts of this book are when Kira finally confronts the gossipy hags at the ball, remarking on the exquisite tailoring of her moody's and glancing knowing at her bump. Shut her up and help Kira learn how to hold her ground. Yeah, it was fun. So this book really brings a lot of things to a head for Kira. And she's basically brings her to the point where she has to decide, is she going to be continue to be cowed by all of this and to be afraid and to hide, or is she going to stand up and for herself? And I love the scenes with the Duchess of Beaumont because it really makes her understand that she can own this, and the people who love her, and the scenes with Gage, the people that love and support her will love and support her no matter what. So she doesn't have to kowtow to all these other people. So it's a good lesson. I mean, it's a lesson I've even had to learn, you know. I mean, if you were a people pleaser and you're worried about not rocking the boat, you know, as most gentlewomen were, you know, so it's a unique situation. But yeah, it brings a lot to a head, and it really forces her to step into her own in a way she's not done yet, which I love. So that is, and it brings close somewhat of an arc to one part of her story. So, and then is able to open other arcs. So, which this kind of feeds into also, I had several people comment about how touching the scene after Gage has gone and read Sir Anthony's Darby's journals, when he comes back and he's just broken up about it. You know, that was on purpose. That was my way of him getting the whole story without Kira having to relive it. And I also, you know, wanted to build and make a point, because I had so many readers like, well, what did Sir Anthony really do? What did he really do? So I did not want to go into that dark place. I didn't want to do flashbacks. I didn't want to force Kira to like relive it by telling everything. So this was my way of being able to inform the characters that needed to be informed, and to kind of clue the reader into some things that they weren't before without having to go quite to such a dark place. And yeah, and it affects Lord Gage also. You know, even her reacting to him, he's never seen her flinch before, and she does. And so it brings a new point in their relationship. There's a scene when he carries her home in his carriage too, that I had that in mind before I even wrote this book. That was one of the scenes I knew needed to be included. I just needed to figure out how they were going to get there. I could just see it happening. And it represents a shift in their relationship. But of course, we find out in subsequent books, there's some other issues. We think maybe things are on a better road, but things are never what they seem with Lord Gage. So let's see. Okay. The other moment in the book that I really love, though it's hard to read, is yes. Okay. Same. That's what I was just talking about. It's heartbreaking. Okay. I'm a bit behind in reading. Okay. I have a question about ranks and names. Yes. Okay. So this person's asking about Lord and Lady Redditch are the parents of 2 sons, Lord Feckenham and Mr. Penrose. Is the family name Penrose, or Redditch and Feckenham are linked to the title? How does that all work? So yes, basically yes. Their last name, their surname is Penrose. But okay, so with titles, there's 5 ranks: Baron, Viscount, Earl, Marquess, and Duke. That's from lowest to highest of the nobility. I mean, because you have baronets and knights and stuff that's a little below that, but the nobility is those 5. So barons were often a family name. So for example, there probably is a Lord Penrose that they have the title to. But then so it's the Earl of Redditch. Lord Feckenham is probably Viscount Feckenham. That's where that falls. And then there would be like a Lord Penrose. Well, the oldest son takes the title of the heir apparent. The oldest son takes the next lowest title. So that's why he's Feckenham. And then if they didn't have that Feckenham title, they would be like Lord Penrose would be what it is. But because Feckenham is higher, that's why he takes the next highest title. If he had a son, let's say, then his son would be Lord Penrose because he's the next heir apparent. So it like all falls like that. Now, if it had been heir, darn it, I'm blanking on the title. But anyway, someone who's not directly in the line. So it's an heir, it's a presumed heir, basically. So like a nephew, let's say the uncle doesn't have a son. So then it's going to fall to the next in the line, and his brother's died and it's his nephew. Then there could possibly come in somebody. So they become the presumed heir, and they don't get a title because it's not 100% certain that they would be the person inheriting. So there's a little bit of confusion there, but that's how it works. There's so much intricacies with titles and stuff. It is something that if you're going to write about the aristocracy in any country, that you have to learn. You have to learn the ins and outs, and there's always tricky situations. Like, for example, the Lady Darby thing. I mean, she's known that by courtesy, but by right that she's not a lady anymore. So, but there's all these intricacies and tricky things, and what the children are called or not called. And so it's something you have to get right if you're going to write this. It's something that, because I've put so much work into trying to make sure I get right, it does drive me crazy when I'm reading a book and they get it wrong. It like throws me out immediately because I'm like, no, that's not right, So it's one of those things most people have no clue about, but yeah, or most Americans have no clue about. So, and probably a lot of lower class, not the upper class Brits, probably don't know all this stuff either, but definitely the Americans don't know about. So it's because I had to learn it, so it's not something we live with every day. So if you got any questions about that, you can always ask me. So let's see if you have any questions. I appreciate that the abuse in Kira's first marriage was clear without dragging readers through pages of descriptions. I think I read the flinch scene a couple times because you conveyed so much in such a concise way. Thank you. Yes, that was really important to me. This whole time, me giving Kira this backstory, I wanted it to be as realistic as possible, because it bothers me when someone uses abuse in a storyline but does not do their due diligence, because it short shrifts the people who've really been through this kind of situation, because it's not fixed like this. I mean, it's just not. And there's so much behind it, and it's years and years of dealing with. And But in that same sense, if you've been through that, or just anybody, you don't necessarily want to reread all of that. You can convey a lot in a bit of space. And so it's that fine balance. Plus this book isn't, this series isn't focused mainly on that. That just happens to be part of her character. So yes. Yeah, no flashbacks. I do have no intentions of doing flashbacks of her time with, and it's just I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there, so I know readers don't want to go there. So that's not going to happen. There would have to be, if that ever happened, there'd have to be a very, very specific reason, and it would not be, that. Anyway. So let's say rank stuff is really interesting. There's a lot of intricacies, and so anyway, if you have any other questions or comments you want me to talk about, I don't want to, just yammer on all night. So, but I'm always happy to talk about anything you want to hear about. We have book 8 next. I was like, what book are we up to? A Stroke of Malice. That will be for next month. The event is scheduled for February 10th at 8 o'clock. And obviously you can jump into the Facebook read along group and post comments and questions always, or just even on here. I'm always happy. You can always just email me separately if you have a question or comment you'd like to leave. So I'm getting really excited because the book release is coming up for book 10. So as we're counting down these last couple books, it's exciting. So, and yes, The Stroke of Malice it fits the timing right now because it was a 12th night book, so which set January 5th, so 1832. So we're kind of in the month of January when that's all set, and the cold and the snow and all that. So which is always kind of fun. So, all right. Well, I don't see any other questions and comments, so I think we'll wrap it up for tonight. And as always, I love answering your questions and chatting and that. So thank you guys all for joining me. Looking forward to joining you next month, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night.